So the Oklahoma Sooners travel to Lincoln, Nebraska and put it on the Nebraska Cornhuskers. Today, we need to talk about where Oklahoma looked really good, where Nebraska struggled, and everything in between. But before we can, as always, y'all know the drill. I need to hear from you. Hop down to the comments, give me a Y for yes or an N for no. Were you impressed by how the Oklahoma Sooners looked today? And let me know what stood out to you. If you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe. Hit that bell notification as I do constant college football content. You don't want to miss any of it. And we are so close to 15,000 subscribers. I would love to have you a part of this awesome community. And if you enjoyed the content, be sure to like and comment down below, as those interactions, though seemingly small, are massive to content creators such as myself. But having said all that, let's jump right into this. And if you tuned in to the preview video on Friday, me and Jay from Unfair Sports talked about a lot of the areas where Oklahoma found immense success. But before we really start diving into that, I want to do something a little bit different. I want to start off with where I was right and where I was wrong. And we'll start with where I was right. First and foremost, I didn't see Nebraska able to score a lot of points in this game. And look, in complete transparency, I was high on Nebraska coming into this year. When I looked at the work they did in the transfer portal, it was intriguing, and especially some of the pieces they got in that recruiting class, including Grant, who was the #1 JUCO running back in the nation last cycle. So Nebraska had some pieces that at least made me ask some questions, and especially when you looked at the importance of this year for Scott Frost, something we've already seen ring true as he's no longer there. But fast forward to this point in the season, and Nebraska hasn't been able to hit the stride that I was thinking they were. And that defense, an area where I knew they would have to replace some veteran guys, they are not the same defense from last year. But this today is not the story of the Nebraska Cornhuskers. Far from it. This is the story of the Oklahoma Sooners. Eric Gray is that dude, and I have been an Eric Gray defender for over a year now, and this is exactly why. Because when I look at this Oklahoma offense, there is no shortage of talent in the running back room for the Sooners, but Eric Gray brings a level of versatility that allows your offense to do absolutely anything. He's dangerous in the pass game. He's dangerous as a traditional running back, and it keeps a defense on their heels. And especially when he gets in space, he's going to put some moves on dudes. Something we saw multiple times today. He averaged over 10 yards per carry. I think Schmitty coming to Oklahoma, the weight he put on in the offseason, was tremendously helpful for Eric Gray, but I still remain extremely high on Eric Gray, as I have for an entire year. Another area we discussed in the preview where we were correct was Oklahoma's ability to make Nebraska one-dimensional, because through much of this game, Oklahoma was able to limit what Nebraska was trying to do offensively. Whether that was on the ground or through the air, they were really putting Nebraska into disadvantageous situations, and it was interesting to see as the game continued to go on, because Nebraska flat out did not have an answer, and this Oklahoma defense looks ferocious at all three levels. The defensive front put a lot of pressure on Casey Thompson and Purdy whenever he was in there, something we talked about in the preview. The linebackers had themselves a game, and the secondary looked strong as always. We saw some action from Jaron Kanek, the true freshman, who I know so many in the Oklahoma fan base remain high on, and for good reason. He fits that cheetah position and what Brent Venables wants to do with that position like a glove. I'm very excited to see what the future holds from him. But do you think I could talk about the defense and not talk about Billy Bowman, someone who continues to improve every single game? And this was another game for Billy Bowman that he went out there and had a really solid performance. Now let's talk about where I was wrong, because I had the Oklahoma Sooners winning this game by 17 points, and the correct answer to that question was by however many points they would like. Because Oklahoma was pretty much, well, unstoppable on offense today. Nebraska came out, had a really good first drive, was able to put points on the board, but from that point on, Oklahoma was moving the ball and scoring at will. And it was really whenever they started transitioning from their first team offense to their second team offense that things started to slow down. Oklahoma was repping some things out, getting some really good work. What I saw out of Oklahoma today was something we talked about in the preview, that they were going to go past page 1, that they would probably go past even page 2 and 3, and not necessarily out of necessity, because it's not like Nebraska took them to page 3 or 4 in their offensive playbook. No, far from that. In fact, I thought that Jeff Lebby would start opening up this playbook because, yes, you've been able to generate wins on page 1 and even maybe page 1.5, but as you progress through the season, you're going to need to have a level of understanding of what page 4 and 5 looks like in your offensive playbook. Because if a defense takes you to page 4 and 5 and it's necessary, you don't want that to be the very first time your team is experiencing that level of depth in your playbook. So whenever the opportunity presented itself, Jeff Lebby was opening up the playbook, and we saw exactly what I've been talking about all offseason, that this is a dangerous offense. And Jeff Lebby runs a high-octane offense, and he's not alone in that. But whenever I look at these high-octane offenses in college football, I liken them to an avalanche. Because once it gets going, it is incredibly difficult to stop, and once the momentum is there, once the timing is down, you're really putting a defense on their heels. Case in point, whenever I look at some of the RPO passes Dillon Gabriel was connecting, those quick slants, it is so difficult to stop them. Now, there were some penalties in the RPO game. Once again, I'm not surprised. I talked about this week 1 when it came to Oklahoma. You're running a high-tempo offense and an RPO offense. You're going to have some of those penalties in the early portion of the season, and it's only natural. Your team is working through things because, as I continue to say, you don't get these type of quality reps in scrimmages. You're used to seeing your own defense. You're not used to seeing the Nebraska Cornhuskers defense, so some of those small mistakes are going to raise their head, and it's nothing problematic in my opinion. It's only a symptom of something new for some of these guys. I'm not too worried about it. Oklahoma's offensive line, I thought, even played better today, and that was one of the areas where we talked about that if you were in Nebraska, you were going to have to key in on. Because if we look at the outside, I thought Oklahoma had the clear advantage on the outside with Weiss, Farouk, Marvin Mims, all of which had a big day. I think if we look in the running back room, I liked Oklahoma's chances to generate successful plays there with Marcus Major, Eric Gray, Barnes. They got a lot of ability there. Whenever I looked at the tight ends, I liked the tight end matchups Oklahoma were able to generate. The only question we've been able to ask about the Oklahoma Sooners thus far, and once again, it's because there's a lot of new, is how is this offensive line going to look as a finished product? And though I don't think they're a finished product just yet, we saw the evolution. We saw the improvement this week. We saw as some guys came back what this offensive line could look like as a more polished product, and they allowed Dillon Gabriel the time to hit some of those big throws, or at least the opportunity to attempt some of those big throws, and then we saw Dillon Gabriel's mobility. If you're looking at this game and wondering what's the takeaway from Oklahoma, how do we look at the Oklahoma Sooners after this game? Well, first and foremost, you have to compliment the defense, because this is a defense that's playing harder, faster, and more inspired than at any point I saw last season. This is a defense that's playing hard-nosed and aggressive downhill, and that's exactly the Brent Venables recipe. So you have to tip your hat to the defense. The offense is something we saw really open up this week. Next week is going to be a fantastic game for Oklahoma. One of the things we talked about in the preview is that I didn't see this being a very close game. This is why I was absolutely wrong on the point spread. But one thing I think we know is that next week's game with Kansas State is going to be must-watch action, and I, for one, cannot wait. Hop down in the comments. Let me know the takeaways you had today. Let me know what you were thinking, because I thought Oklahoma played a really, really good game. That's it. See ya.